Can Samsung beat Apple at its own game? That is the question, and yeah, let me explain. See, while this whole idea of camera phones started as more of a Huawei thing, RIP in the West, and which later permeated into Google's Nexus and then the Pixel, Samsung is the first company to democratize it with the Galaxy S20 Ultra. The company did not invent periscopic zoom, but did a better job at marketing it, whereas Apple at the time was barely launching its first iPhone with 3 cameras, and wouldn't adopt better zoom capabilities until 4 generations later. Samsung's Ultra spent years being, for all intents and purposes, the most recognized camera king, up until around 3 years ago when iteration just took over. Chinese phones aside, which is a separate topic in itself, Apple's latest Pro iPhones have proven to be so good that I'm seriously wondering which is more Ultra, and especially because once you look at how Apple pulled it off, it might just be that Samsung's bet on software might make more sense than you think. I'm Jaime Rivera, and it's about that time for this much-needed comparison, sponsored by Supcase. Stick around to learn more about how Supcase fixes one of my biggest complaints with this new Galaxy while augmenting the iPhone. Let's begin with the most important premise, and it's that the vast majority of people buy these because they're the best iPhone or Galaxy, so let's begin the comparison looking at them as phones. Visually, they could not be more different, and if anything, that tells you a lot about how priorities have shifted. The first Galaxy S20 Ultra looked almost like a tool where form followed function, but this year, it's the complete opposite. I'd even say this Galaxy S26 is the most iPhone Galaxy ever, with elegant curves, glass on glass, and complete minimalism all over. The iPhone, by contrast, seriously looks like no other phone. I actually feel it borrows from more of the appeal of a regular camera, where materials and finishes vary based on utility and not looks. Samsung also followed Apple in switching back to armor aluminum on the borders instead of titanium, and I also feel its more polished finish will age better over time than Apple's thicker finish. They're both protected by the best glass, with Apple's approach having a better reputation. They're both just as tall and wide, but the Galaxy is now nearly 1 millimeter thinner and nearly 20 grams lighter. Overall, my points go to the Galaxy when it comes to design, but that's not everything. These displays are then a story where Samsung's also just brought an interesting edge. See, while they're both the same size, provide similar pixel density, refresh rate, and are both incredibly accurate in color and viewing angles, the Galaxy wins in two departments. One is for its support for the S Pen, which, while not as much of a halo feature as it was before, continues to be an incredible convenience for signing documents or taking quick notes. But then this privacy display on the Galaxy is incredibly useful. Instead of ruining this display with a dark screen protector, this idea of having narrow pixel switch off during notifications, specific applications, or entirely is just genius.
I wouldn't buy, as these have historically not aged well.
But as for content consumption, both phones have really great speakers.
S25 FE for $646 with an
And
excellent.
then once you look into internals, things continue to get interesting. Apple's A19 Pro continues to lead the way in terms of single-core performance, but man, this new Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 for Galaxy packs a higher multi-core punch. Both phones start with the same RAM, though the Galaxy offers more for the top storage option, but then the iPhone offers a higher storage tier. Their battery sizes are nearly the same. Their charging capabilities, both wired and wireless, are also very similar. They both support the same connectivity. Like, those days of iPhones falling behind the numbers are long gone, so I'll call this one a tie. The problem with the switch to aluminum on both is that, yeah, it no longer has the added rigidity of titanium, meaning dents and scuffs will be far more visible, and especially with these darker colors. Then there's the fact that the insane camera wobble on the Galaxy is a slide off a table just waiting to happen, which the iPhone isn't exempt from, as the incline is a risk for any of the phone's corners at an angle. And then you guessed it, the lack of magnets is yet another problem on the Galaxy that limits wireless charging speeds if you don't have the right accessories, and then modularity. You're definitely going to need a good case, and channel sponsor Supcase solves all this with either of their flagship products. The UB Grip is one of my favorites thanks to its N52 magnets, giving them a powerful hold for accessories, and yet you still get an adjustable kickstand. Its mil-spec 810H for up to 15-foot drops brings a special anti-slip design that manages to not get stuck in your pocket and is so precise in its cutouts that every accessory fits just fine. Now, if you're looking for the best bang for the buck rugged case, it doesn't get any better than the UB Pro Max series. It brings an upgraded airbag and military drop protection for up to 20 feet, the same N52 magnets, the anti-slip texture, the multifunctional kickstand, and all the built-in screen protection you need, along with easy access to camera control on the iPhone. There's a belt holster in certain models, and at the same time, it's my go-to case for cycling, as it saved my previous iPhones and even my Galaxy Z Fold 7 from the worst falls on concrete you could think of. Be it the UB Grip or the UB Pro, all come in multiple colors, and at their price points, I doubt you'll find another set of options that's more complete. Thanks to Supcase for sponsoring this video. Follow the first link in the description to learn more about them. Now, software is then an interesting case of good and potential. I'm actually holding back my review of the Galaxy S26 Ultra because the whole agentic phone selling point is not ready until launch day, and you all know the story of Apple Intelligence. As regular phones, I have to say their experiences are a tie as well. Samsung has really removed a ton of the gimmicks to match Apple in a very grounded launch of One UI 8.5. I will admit I prefer iOS 26 in the little things, like the ever-changing lock screen and the bolder always-on display. I seriously don't think Liquid Glass is any better, but I do like the user interface updates, even if Samsung has its own tone of elegance. Galaxy AI in its current state is pretty close to what Apple Intelligence offers, though Samsung is superior in how it edits photos. I'd even say Samsung has made massive leaps in improving its ecosystem to speak better with its other products. It's still not at Apple's level of reliability, but seriously very close. All we're missing now is support for AirDrop, but I think it's only a matter of time. Overall, you pick what's best for you, but iOS it is for me. In day-to-day use, though, I'm struggling to find a winner, and that's actually a good thing. Yes, no silicon carbon batteries on either, and yet both phones have lasted more than a day with ease, with the Galaxy having a slight edge. I have yet to see stutters on my typical usage, and while Apple has more AAA games available than Android, gaming is just as epic, and their vapor chambers keep the experience cool. My test on Verizon's network in both phone calls and data was also comparable on both, so yeah, here is another tie, though I'll admit Samsung's extra display perks make me give it extra points. Now, when we get to photography and videography, this is where things get tricky because neither is using new camera sensors, though the primary on the iPhone is only 2 years old and slightly larger than Samsung's 4-year-old HP2. Both companies are banking more on either brighter apertures or new software tricks to deliver better results. I'm also going to need an extra video just to go through all the pro features both these devices support, because if not, the story is just going to be too long. For now, let me focus this one on what's conventional. So, forgive me, but I've spent hours going back and forth trying to make sure I was looking at results from two different phones. If anything, Samsung's new color science is warmer in certain scenarios, but wow, these photos are nearly identical. Both phones are doing great on detail and dynamic range, with the obvious variations in focal length options, which are quite different, and where the Galaxy can go further and is also wider than the iPhone in certain cases. Each handles nature and street photography just as well, with pretty imposing results if you know how to frame your shots. I seriously loved them both. In low light, the experience was weird because the Galaxy is quicker in certain angles and then the iPhone was quicker in others. Yes, the Galaxy has brighter apertures, but the iPhone has slightly larger sensors, and then the results were fairly similar on both, where each handled detail in rough scenarios in comparable ways. I think it's more of a processing thing, where I praise Samsung for finally addressing the old shutter lag issues we had. The Galaxy is definitely your phone for moonshots as well versus the iPhone, but in everything else, it's pretty much the same thing. Oddly, in portraits and selfies, both struggle to do a good job detecting multiple subjects, and then it was hit or miss over what phone handled low light scenarios better. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the results, but not the inconsistencies. If anything, where the iPhone wins me over is with its center stage camera, which is epic in both versatility and how wide it is, so I'll drift more to the iPhone in this department. Thing is, once you switch the narrative to video, guys, it finally happened. The Galaxy is finally on par with the iPhone. It took, like 16 years? But seriously, great color, detail, stabilization, and dynamic range from Samsung, where in the past this was a warpy mess. I trust the iPhone better at concerts as I feel Apple handles dynamic range better, but the difference is really close to insignificant, and it's mostly Samsung blowing up the highlights too much, so I feel that could be fixed with software. I also prefer Apple's center stage camera for video given its wider field of view, though look at the dynamic range from the Galaxy. Like seriously, bravo Samsung, this is amazing. I will get back to you in future videos regarding lock performance, APV, and horizontal lock, as that's an entirely different conversation on its own. What matters here is that the iPhone finally met its match when it comes to Samsung. To conclude, wow, this was a tough one. This iPhone 17 Pro Max won my comparison last year against the Galaxy S25 Ultra, but clearly Samsung has been working hard in maturing its experience, and it shows. It wins hardware, it wins the display, they're tied for internals, and then software and the user experience is more a matter of taste. Photography is then a tie, and videography as well, which I was not expecting. Obviously, yes, I need to pick a winner, and seriously, welcome back Samsung. I do think this is the better phone, and not just in specs or numbers, but honestly in useful experiences for most people. I'll admit my personal pick would still be the iPhone given how much of a professional video camera replacement this has become. I do consider it has better beat camera potential for what I do, but for the first time ever, I can actually recommend a Galaxy for creators. I'm seriously in shock. You know, to be honest, I walked into this comparison biased towards the iPhone because of just how iterative the Galaxy S has become for years now, but I think Samsung has discovered something Apple mastered years ago, and it's that throwing specifications at a phone is pointless without good implementation. You're just making the product more expensive and not really getting the results you want. Mastering the marriage of software with hardware is what delights consumers, and that's what this Galaxy has finally done. And then, if that agentic promise is as good as the rest of this phone is, that'll be an even bigger deal given Apple's delays in the topic, so stay tuned for my full review coming soon. I seriously feel I need a part 2 of this discussion to address all this phone can do in a fair way. Let me know if you agree with my choices in the comments below, and while you're at it, please like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments as you see me try to respond to as many as I can. Also follow me on social media as more behind the scenes work happens there. There is so much product to test right now, it's crazy. Guys, by the way, our Technically There podcast with Josh is returning very soon, so stay tuned for that as well. I'm Jaime Rivera. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.